Welcome to Behind the ABA Talk podcast, where we have heart to heart conversations with ABA experts, thought leaders, and change makers. Each episode unpacks the stories, insights, and behind the scenes realities that shaped our experts' professional journeys. I'm your host, Lisa Gurdon, founder of Alice Gurdon Consulting, and I am so excited to welcome my guest, Kim Edwards. As a licensed speech pathologist and trained behavior analyst, Kim Edwards has dedicated her career to ensuring SLPs and BCBAs know exactly how to do that. Today, we're talking about cultural humility, why it matters in school-based practice, and the on-demand continuing education webinar on cultural humility that is designed to help school staff deepen their understanding and support for all children and families, because every child who walks into a school deserves a clinician who sees them fully, not just their communication profile or their behavior, but their culture, their family, and their community. Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
We have presented together over the past few years on collaboration and supervision in New York and in Lisbon, and it has just been so much fun.
It's been the coolest roller coaster without getting that little butterflies in your stomach.
It's so fun, and we get to continue our tour. We get to talk this summer at the the Women in Behavior Analysis conference in Chicago, which will be super fun. And then we get to go to Prague with Stephanie Mitchell and Hannah Rue to talk about collaboration across clinical, school, and 18 to 22 transition programs to a global community of behavior analysts, which I just find so cool.
Yes, I'm so excited and just excited to be a part of a group of amazing, just not only intelligent in their clinical practice, but intelligent in like worldly knowledge of the clinical world. So super excited.
Yes, yes. I loved in Lisbon when we were talking to a group of people from all over the world who were doing similar work or the same work, just in different contexts and with across different cultures. And it was so interesting. I grew so much, learned so much from that experience. And so today we are really going to talk about cultural humility. And you joined a panel with Mary Jane Weiss, Ksenia Gatsounis, Brian Connors, and Adriana Rodriguez a few years ago to talk about practicing ABA in schools with cultural humility. Both events are now on demand for both supervision and ethics CEUs, respectively. And at the end of the episode, I will share a special discount code for behavior analysts for both CE events. So stay tuned for that. So, Kim, take us back to the beginning. What drew you to this work? And tell us about your journey in ABA and speech pathology.
Yeah, great question. Let's set the foundation, right? Because I'm sure there's plenty of people that have no idea who I am. So basically, when I first started as a SLP, I really loved the role, right? I love the versatility of it. I love the different avenues and venues that you could pursue professionally, as well as the interconnectedness with other professionals. And I felt like, oh, we're kind of on the front lines of these students and families and just communities really accessing language and connecting, and being able to give individuals that opportunity to either get their life back or increase and improve their current life and just how they navigate communication. Um, so of course, as a young practitioner, I was like, oh, we're going to save the world. We're going to bring everyone great communication. But as that, changed and shifted, and as I moved from Virginia, Southern Virginia, to Washington, D.C., I really saw not only a change in demographic, but really a change in the lens that I had as a practitioner, a change that needed to happen. And I think we'll probably end up talking about that a little bit later with the cultural humility and what that looks like and what that has transitioned into over the years. Um, but I saw that the way I was serving students was great and fine and practical and, by the book. And it was leaving out a huge component of serving, that servitude of not only individuals, but of their household. and really kind of looking at what are the systems that have gotten them here, where they're walking in the door or coming in the door if they aren't able, but also looking beyond the label that has been put upon them, looking beyond, excuse me, the behaviors that maybe they're presenting with, and especially looking beyond, for in some cases, the test scores, especially working in school systems, those standardized test scores that we look at for evaluations is one component of that whole child. Really understanding the conditions that surround that child and the conditions that surround that family if the student is older or if you're working with adults. So that kind of really, I would say, pivoted the way I looked at speech in general to a more holistic, what is the behavior that we're looking at? Which, of course, put me right in line to Nerd Fest of behavior, ABA. This is a whole nother world. I should learn about this. So that kind of took me down the rabbit hole of taking one class, taking two classes. Oh, well, I might as well finish the certification. Oh, I might as well do the practicum as well. And here we are, almost 10 years later, really being able to work alongside great behavior analysts and also being able to work alongside great SLPs, OTs, PTs, and the instructional world. So that led me to going through a graduate program, second time around, excuse me, for ABA. Uh, and I think something else that really shifted my career scope was when I moved to DC. I had no longer worked in the private sector as far as a SLP, but worked in the charter world. And that really illuminated the possibilities, but also the needs of some sort of synergy, right? Interconnectedness between culture, family partnership, behavior, and language that was all coming in with the students as they walked in the door. So honestly, I don't think I would have done it in a different way. It's definitely a hodgepodge of a path to get to where I'm at now, though I appreciate it. I feel as though it gave me a really good understanding and a grounding to what are the needs, what is drawing students to um, be in a place where communication or behavior or support in general outside of their home is necessary to increase their whole livelihood. And also bringing attention to systems that maybe were not truly understood but need to be shifted or changed to support students. So, hopefully, I answered your question in that very long journey.
Yes, no,
Right.
absolutely. And your journey is continuing, right? I mean, you're
Yes.
about to start your dissertation for your PhD. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yes. I mean, ultimate nerd fest, similar to going down the rabbit hole, so to speak, of ABA. I was blessed, I would say, to have the opportunity to work as a program manager in the charter world and to be a part of two different teams that founded schools, both elementary schools. And during that journey of looking at not only the clinicians and hiring and what we're looking for to create the culture of a school, but also how we are creating the mission, how we're creating the vision for the schools, um, how we're creating the behavior and support systems for the schools really gave me the opportunity to look deeper into um, what is the lens that I want those working in the school to have? And also, what is the level of appreciation that I want students and families to feel when they are walking into the school, when they are getting support, when they are learning from our educators? And that really, I would say, spearheaded the interest and the research in supervision and coaching. I had a lot of background in instructional coaching and more of that academic space and had lived my own life experience right through the ABA and certification, getting the numerous hours for my practicum. And so being able to take away somewhat of those three experiences of academic instructional coaching, of practicum support and coaching through supervision from ABA, and then pulling back the knowledge from my practicum support in the three different locations to become an SLP. I felt that the three disciplines were so different in their approach to support and supervision, and could really learn from one another rather than being in silos. Because once you have all those degrees, you're working in the same spaces, you're working with each other, alongside each other, having a lot of communication to support individuals, though the training looked immensely different. And so that kind of got me down that path of really researching support, researching cultural responsive support, specifically in coaching. Not only coaching new practitioners, but coaching practitioners that have been in the field,
Yeah.
because we never stop learning, and we shouldn't want to.
Yes. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you said so many things that resonate with me and perhaps our listeners as well. And just that connection, making those connections of all the different parts of a student's experience in school, at home, socially, academically, and communication, behavior, emotionally, all of those pieces, and it's so important to put them together. And we can't do that on our own, right? Like, I can't do that on my own as a behavior analyst. I need all these other, professionals to support and enhance my understanding of a student so I can help them, right? Without that full understanding, like you said,
Mhm.
we're just working in silos. And yet we were not trained to do that. And so that's why this work that you're doing for me, the podcast, the continuing education, is designed to really fill those gaps, because the students and families and the work we're doing asks us to do that, right? It's like screaming at us to collaborate, to connect, to share, to work fully together. And I like the word appreciation, with appreciation and respect for one another. Um, um,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and for the future, right? Because I mean,
Yes.
we are only here in this season of our life for a certain number of years, or a certain amount of time. So, I always think about one of my school principals years ago had had this statement, or had this notion about the way that he practiced, and I saw it kind of as a through line in the way he interviewed, in the way that he onboarded folks, in the way that he supported folks as they transitioned outside of his school into other positions, was starting day one, creating your successor, creating your successive plan, your system, knowing that you will not be there forever. I think shifts that mindset of less of kind of like informational hoarding, right?
Yes.
Of constantly thinking of how can I make sure that those around me and those that come after me are coming out as a better version than what I was.
Yes, I think that's a great way to think about it. I think about it too as kind of leaving whatever situation you're in better than it was before, because of your presence, of your being, of your support, of your insight, of just being there to support others and ask questions and being curious and all of those things. So tell me about cultural humility, and how did that kind of become a focus for you in your work?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to ask if I can make a slight distinction before answering, and I promise I'll circle back to
Oh,
it.
yes, please. Yes, because
Um,
I think there's a lot of different words that people are using
yeah.
out there: cultural humility, cultural competence, cultural responsiveness. There's a lot of that. It is really hard to keep it straight. So I would appreciate, yes, please, um, explain all that to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that cultural humility, right, of really learning about a culture and understanding and respecting, is very much needed and necessary. And as time has gone on, as our research has changed, as our lenses have changed, I very much intend to utilize humility and build upon it in the way that we've seen in our world today, right? That learning and knowing is one component, but transitioning more to how are we supporting? How are we using the interchangeable terms to really bring about tangible adjustments to
Yeah.
what we're doing and not simply having a knowledge of, right? So I think about
Mm.
cultural humility is a way of knowledge, but really moving towards what's our action step? How are we applying that knowledge in a tangible way? Whether it's, the communication or the clinical work, or it's policy and making sure that we have the right boundaries and systems set up, or if it's specifically the treatment, right? The treatment protocols, but also the way and manner in which we are creating these plans for individuals. And speaking of individuals, making sure that what we do is specifically tailored and it's not based on some sort of limiting or even somewhat destructive stereotyping that may be associated with that individual or that group. Um, and monitoring that power imbalance, right? Because I think that there's no way to authentically, ethically, and just morally support individuals without acknowledging that there are power imbalances and that shifts, right? That shifts based on the role, that shifts based on the knowledge, and having some sort of accountability to make sure that we're being equitable about the way that we are supporting and serving certain communities. And yeah, I just think that that framework guides how we examine, how we support, and how we prevent further harm in our practice. So, really making it real world practice in a better way. Um,
Yes. So are the terms then,
mm,
that cultural humility, cultural competence, and responsiveness, are those interchangeable? Um, I never know what word to use when I'm talking about it. And
mhm.
there are others who also get a little confused with that. Can you guide us?
Yeah, yeah, I would say in my experience and in the research that I've done, looking at especially what's been done in the overall healthcare system, I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of research that backs up that work, as well as the ASHA, the American Speech and Hearing Association, looking at what components are within that cultural humility, which is really from a psychological framework, right? That the literature comes from that sphere of work, from how something is happening and why it's happening to what is being done. What is the behavior? What is the therapeutic intervention? What are the experts that are having complementary skills rather than a a list or a competency that people feel as though, oh, I've hit the mark, I've reached a certain level. There is no level to reach. It's continuously acting upon and making uh, equitable decisions and decisions that help support not only the knowledge, but the actual practice. So I would say that maybe early on in that research, those terms would be interchangeable, but they really are different. There's a different purpose, there's a different foundation on them. So really, the thinking of how versus what are we doing? What are the action steps? What are the systems in place?
Okay. It's coming together. It's coming more together. So,
I know.
so
I was like, there's a diagram that I'm like, I wish I could draw and have a marker and show. But yes.
yeah, because my understanding is kind of it is practicing with cultural responsiveness and
Mm,
over time as a lifelong process. And it is lifelong process. Like we're not a
yeah.
lifelong, we're not, it's not a one-shot deal where you take a course and cultural humility and you got it. That cultural, my understanding is cultural humility is really something we're always learning about. And I think partly because there's a lot of self-reflection there. If you're talking about biases, if you're talking about power dynamics, if you're talking about, practicing in an inequitable way without realizing any of that, I mean, that's a lot of work to be done. And that's really hard. Like, how do
It
you?
is. It is. And you have to want to, right? And I think that's where
Yeah,
there's so much value in that component, right? Because you have to want to and have to be willing and brave to have honest and earnest self-reflection and another level of accountability when you are acting upon that self-reflection, when you are adapting perhaps your communication based on that. You're adapting and advocating for policy change because of that. And the day-to-day practice, right? Your practice should be changing as we develop, as we learn, and as research shows us, is what we're doing working? And
Yeah.
is it working for the betterment of the individual, or is it just working because that's what we've been doing, or this has worked for
Right.
them? Um,
Right. It's the way we've always done it. I hear a lot from people. It's the way we've always done it. And yes, and we can
Mm.
grow and learn and evolve because again, the students, the families, they're begging us to do that by bringing us these complex problems and these cultural values that we are not so familiar with. They're begging us to do this kind of work, and I don't know. I feel like for me, it is so reinforcing and rewarding to work with people with different professional backgrounds and with families with different cultures because we get to learn and evolve and think about how we're practicing differently. So for me, that's really reinforcing. But I think for a lot of people, especially newer clinicians, um, that's scary and that's hard when you're kind of new in the field and exploring and finding your way to figure out how to do that and how to misstep and say
Mhm.
okay and learn from that and do something differently. What kind of guidance or suggestions do you have for clinicians who are trying to find their way with that, because it's hard.
Yeah, I think starting off with the, I would say, tried and true, reading a book. I know it
Mm.
sounds um, a little trite to say because we all know that. And there is really a wealth of knowledge from books and from journal articles. Um, in this day and age, I'm a big fan of a podcast, of a blog, those quick sound bites that might get you interested and pique your interest, but also give you the quick access to the direct links, right, of research that has been done in the past, but also updated research. Many individuals refresh and refine their work as time goes on. So you might see a book about, let's say, cultural responsive practices in ABA, and then you see another rendition of it, or you see a review of that same uh, book by the same authors with new data, right? Um, a lot of work that's been done, I think, virtually, really gives us that opportunity to eliminate some of the barriers, as we said in the very beginning, of work that's being done locally, domestically, and then internationally. And we're in a place in our world where we're able to exchange that in an instant. So, really being able to not only look at the tangible and the kind of black and white of writing and books and blogs, but also having the opportunity to sit in a CE that is done in another state or another country, by subject matter experts, to be able to attend conferences and being knowledgeable that yes, conferences do still cost money. There is a financial um, lift, so to speak. There is a social economic lift, right? Having to have that time off, depending on your role, depending on what type of job you have. But the luxury that we have now is things are recorded, right? Things are available at any point in time. And we can use our computers, we can use our phones to gather that information. So I would say those are some ways that I would start off. And building upon that, that is how you can get that segue into building your community. Building your community means so many things to individuals. And a lot of times when people hear that word of building community, it's your personal community, which is immensely important, right? You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. But in that building community, building your practice community, building your professional community, um, whether it's consultants, whether it's other individuals that have been practicing longer than you. And I would even urge individuals to find a group or find an individual that practices in a completely different setting, because that context really matters, but that also builds a lot of knowledge and expertise and experience, that both individuals can gain from. So I would say those are my top two, is finding that nitty gritty, kind of that gray literature that's out there. And then also looking at what are the practical things that are being published, what are the practical things that are visually available through podcasts and those media um, outlets and building that professional community.
Yes, and I think even on a day-to-day level, what has helped me continue to grow in this space as well and in my practice is having those conversations about culture, about context in those day-to-day meetings with other professionals and families, and that ongoing curiosity of, hey, tell me about that. And, let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, the language barrier that's happening here, and how do we support given that language barrier, because there are a lot of behavior analysts that are working in schools, and speech therapists as well, clinicians who are working in schools that have a strong multicultural component, who have newcomers from different places with different values, and it's presenting a lot of different challenges that people are not used to. So I think continuing those day-to-day conversations and opening yourself up to different ways of working is so important. And the community you're talking about is, I totally agree. It's just creating this support so we can all kind of grow and learn together. Um, so at what point did was cultural humility a focus, not just kind of a dabble or a thinking about, but really a focus of your work, because you've done so many things and you've learned so many things. So when does that become a focus, and how is it integrated kind of into your work? Um, More because there are so many parts to your knowledge and the things that you do.
Thank you. And thank you for circling back, because I did say I was going to circle back and then I did not. So
Yes.
thank you. I appreciate that soft push. Um, Really, when going back to that transition in my life, moving from a southern state, working in private practice, working in clinical settings, to coming into the DC metropolitan area. And for those listening, DC is a beautiful melting pot, so to speak, of culture, of race, of language, of abilities. Uh, it also comes with real world implications of power dynamics, real world implications of social dynamics and financial dynamics that are all in one place, right? You can have one school that has individuals that are um, really working against the system that has been created for several years and kind of climbing up the ladder alongside those that historically had built that ladder, built said ceiling. And so really being able to, I would say, have the privilege of the problem, right? Of how do we navigate all these individuals and their backgrounds and their needs, and affirming their identities and dismantling some of the biases that maybe the social constructs have created, and looking at, are we serving all of our individuals equitably? Are we serving their communities? Are we serving ourselves as being practitioners that are looking beyond the label, looking beyond perhaps over disciplined individuals, and asking some of those hard questions of, what is this student doing? What are we doing? And what systems are in place that are perpetuating this? And how do we dismantle that? So that really opened my eyes to another realm of work that needed to be done, that was really the underpinning of my clinical work, right? Looking at, okay, we're practicing, we're looking at students, we're looking at professionals. And I would say, even in the interview process, that was also an area that I had quite a bit of interest in. Did not pursue the HR world, thought about it for a hot second, and I was like, nope, stay focused. Because found it very interesting in the interview process and onboarding process for clinicians and teachers, that did not necessarily include some of those tough questions of, how are you working to
Mhm.
dismantle racism? How are you including trauma into your practice? What are the steps that you utilize to ensure that families are affirmed, uplifted, and integral parts of the communication and the treatment plans? And the one question that I had never asked myself in a practice, but I did when I made that transition was, what are institutional mistrusts that I need to combat in
Mm,
the way that I work with this family?
mhm.
That was something that I felt as though was not explicitly taught or
Right.
even discussed, let alone practice having those conversations, in my training and upbringing in the clinical world. So that realization really sent me into that deep dive study and ultimate nerd fest
Yeah.
into cultural responsive instruction, supervision frameworks, identity work, equity coaching, and just that intentionality and positionality. So I would say that was kind
Yeah.
of like the nail in the coffin for this work has to change, and how we support and how we
Yes.
bring individuals into this field has to change.
Yes. Oh my gosh, 100%. And it's so interesting you use the word institutional mistrust, because I see that as well. Never thought about it in that way. But in the work that I do with a lot of families who've had a pretty long history of a lot of stress, a lot of frustration, school teams as well, and there is this mistrust
Mhm.
that develops over time, and that's a hard nut to crack because it's that mistrust has been reinforced over the years, and so I so appreciate the work you're doing and kind of reevaluating our approach to families and what are we doing here to support them and appreciate them and have them feel valued and part of the community so we can support their kiddos who are having a tough time, and their families are having a tough time. And so I really appreciate that you are really focusing on this in your work. It's so, so important.
Yeah, I love it, and not to downplay, right, the great work that higher ed is doing, and the way that practicums are being rewritten, and even competencies, right, especially even
Right.
in the MBA field, competencies that are were thoughts, were conversations, but now are requirements.
Yes.
Completion program, that is a wonderful way of seeing how this does change how we bring up individuals into that clinical world.
Yes.
But I think more is always better, and more intentional work, right? You can deliver technically sound, fabulous interventions
Absolutely.
and still miss the mark if you've not done some of
For
that
sure.
work in examining your own biases and blind spots.
For sure.
So,
And those are new developments in our field. So what about all those of us who've been working for 25 years, 15 years, even, 10 years, 5 years? These are new developments in our field. So all of us need to kind of look at how we're practicing and and bring it up a notch and bring deepen our understanding, which is what for me the continuing education program is about, right? It's about filling those gaps. It's about highlighting the work, the mindset shifts we need to make in order to really fully support people across settings.
absolutely. And I think what you just said was a real piece. And I appreciate your authenticity of the work is hard.
The work is
It's
hard.
beautiful work, it's meaningful work. And I think anyone that chooses a profession that is a serving profession
Yeah.
understands that kind of dichotomy of I'm working to the bone, but it's really good work and it's necessary. And there's a level of, I think, passion
Mhm.
alongside resilience, alongside having that boundary, right, of still filling your own cup. That's necessary in order to sustain this work.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
because
So
those that do it are amazing individuals, and we need people to continue this work. But I think, going back to the what I love is that coaching and support.
yes.
How do we make sure the work is sustainable? You know,
Yes, and there's a very high burnout rate in our field in behavior analysis, very high burnout rate, and I see it with my colleagues. I see it, in continuing education. How are you all doing? Exhausted, exhausted,
yeah,
exhausted. And so I've been talking about this a lot. I've been thinking about this a lot, exploring this a lot, and there's one book to throw out there. It's called The Well Helper by Catherine King,
mm,
who and she designed a book for us, right? For all of us in the helping professionals because we give so much. How do we avoid the burnout? How do we, I call it the burnout zone. Like, how do we avoid that, right? How do we build resilience so we stay in this extremely meaningful work? So, Kim, given all the things, you know,
Mhm.
how do you have resilience? How do you take care of yourself? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. Great question. And as you were saying the burnout rate, I was thinking of an article which I'm not going to remember the authors, so please look this up if you're listening to this. But it was about self-care strategies among behavior analysts and that work-life balance, but also work engagement. I believe the article I know was in ABAI maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and just really good research on exactly what we're speaking about, what components create that burnout, so to speak, but also what are some predictors. And so I think that aspect of what are predictors is where we can do the work. So to answer your question, knowing that time is going to be a predictor, knowing that level of intense computer, your body is internalizing some of the stressors that are on the outside, right? So thinking about what am I doing with my body? How am I intentionally resting, not only mentally, but emotionally? Um, for me, quiet time. I'm a huge runner, so running with my running group. Um, I lead a Bible study, so really thinking about how that's how I serve my community, and that does refill my cup. It's serving in a different way, and also serving in a capacity that stretches me. I think mentally and emotionally, but does not exhaust me. Is kind of like the practical things that I do, and also continuing to have fun. I
Yes.
think you and I share that moment of we live once, let's do it, go big and go home. So I'm
Yes.
always down for a flight anywhere.
Yes, and because it's really about joy. And we find joy in connection. We find joy in helping others, in having those meaningful conversations with one another about these things. That's where we live. We live in those moments. And it has been so fun over the past few years, Kim, together, you and I have been living those moments in different places and having conversations and presenting on topics that really matter to us. And it's been such a pleasure and such a privilege to be able, to do that.
Thank you. And everyone has to figure out what fills your cup. For
Yes,
me, I am a people person.
yes.
So what fills my cup is being a part of a community. That's my wellness. That's my sweet spot. So
Yes. Yes. And everyone does have to figure it out for sure. And I'll be doing actually a free continuing education for BCBAs this summer on building resilience and looking at building daily habits that help us deal with some of those daily pressures, daily stresses. So I'm excited to talk about that. And the article that you mentioned, I think, is by Slowiak and Longchamp.
yes, yes, yes,
It's
yes.
ABAI in 2022, Behavior Analysis and Practice. And the title is Self Care Strategies and Job Crafting Practices Among Behavior Analysts. Do they predict perceptions of work life balance, work engagement, and burnout? That's a really good article. I found several others in that space that I will be talking about and sharing in that CE over the summer on resilience because we are now thankfully starting to look at that and starting to really explore that because our field again is demanding it. It is a lot and we have a lot of work to do to deepen our practice, which is really exciting to me because there's places we can go, there's things we can do.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
thank
there's,
you for creating those spaces. This is a topic that I think listeners resonate with. Speaking what other people feel, or just maybe haven't said. And, we're not lying and saying this work is easy. We're not saying, oh, just do this, that, and the third. We're saying it takes feedback, it takes
yes,
repair, it takes ongoing commitment.
yes.
But people are hungry for this work, for this support. And so thank you for creating a platform and creating an opportunity and honestly being authentic with your responses. So,
Yeah, no, it's what I love to do, and it really is about connection and each other. We need each other to do all of this work, and that's where I find the beauty is in those relationships. For me, it's all about relationships and getting to know people and learn from people. So in that CE, that continuing education webinar that you did, practicing ABA in schools with cultural humility, with your amazing panel. If people want to go ahead and listen and earn CEUs, ethics CEUs, what are some highlights? What can people expect to learn?
definitely learning that this is genuinely a work that is ongoing, right? It's not just theoretical, it's actionable, and there's equitable commitment from everyone, right? There is cultural work that is internal as well as external, and really allowing individuals to hear other people's opinions, other people's experiences, whether they are in a clinical setting, school setting, university setting, and really being able to see how can I leave with not only a mirror for myself, but leave with a framework and be encouraged to keep practicing and have actionable steps within my practice.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Well, Kim, we could talk all day as we have found out. But I so appreciate you today and talking about all of these things. And I'm so excited for our upcoming talks in Chicago and Prague and wherever else we go to talk about these very important things. So thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I have and feel inspired to continue to grow and learn in the context of our practice, in the context of supporting students and families, and with cultural humility and deepening our understanding. And so be sure to click the link in the podcast episode description to listen to Kim's on demand webinars, Practicing ABA in Schools with Cultural Humility, and also Enhancing Supervisory Skills, which was a supervision panel with Dr. Hannah Rue, Dr. Susan Ainsley, and myself. Take a look, take a listen, BCBAs. Be sure to use this promo code Insight Podcast. That's Insight Podcast for 50% off of both webinars. So it's just $5 a CEU. And I just hope that you access all of these amazing presenters who are talking about the things that matter, the things they're passionate about, and the things that can elevate our practice. So thank you again to Kim for being here today. Special thank you to my podcast producer, Cole Asher Hoffman. And I will see you next time.